Hello, welcome to the West Side Podcast. This is where we'll post some of our audio from our sermons on Sunday, and we're so glad that you're here. Westside's vision is to reconcile people to God through the grace of Jesus step by step. We hope you enjoy, and thanks for tuning in.
All right. To Ruth. I know these are different kinds of sermons than we are used to, but I don't know about you, I love it. This is so fun going through a story like this one, particularly one as beautiful as the story of Ruth. Gianna did a great job last week setting up the situation of Naomi and her loss, and then Ruth's courageous step to go be with her. And man, the scene that sticks with me from that first chapter is when Naomi comes back and she's greeted by the women of her hometown, and they're surely like hugging and kissing her and welcoming her, and they're just absolutely shocked to see her there. And as this beautiful moment is happening, there's Ruth over on the side. And at some point, one of the women probably looks up and goes, "Who's that? Who's this outsider? Who's this foreigner from an icky land that you brought to be with us?" Be that Moab, or as we learned last week, Bakersfield. Apparently, Bakersfield is Moab. I hadn't seen that in my study before, but apparently it checks out from anybody from the Simi Valley area. So just a quick, just in case you haven't been here or this is your first time or something, just a quick story reset. So here's what happens in chapter 1 of Ruth. First, there's this man named Elimelech, and he takes his family from Moab to Moab from Bethlehem during a famine. There's a famine in the land, and Elimelech goes, "What am I going to do to provide for my family?" And the decision that he makes is to go back east, to go back to the land where they once were, and to try to see if the Lord will provide there. While there, he, Elimelech, and his 2 sons die, leaving Naomi and her 2 Moabite daughters-in-law to fend for themselves. And in the world of the Beit Av, the house of the father, in the world of the patriarch being the one who provides for everything, for these 3 women to be left out on their own would be essentially a death sentence, especially in a foreign land. So eventually Naomi decides to return to Bethlehem, and Orpah, one of her daughters-in-law, she goes back to her family of origin, while Ruth courageously clings to Naomi. "Your people are going to be my people. Your God is going to be my God. I'm not going to let go of you, Naomi." That's what Ruth does. And then the last sentence, Gianna set you up for this, the last sentence of Ruth foreshadows what is to come. Hebrew narrative likes to do this a whole lot. Where it ends a section with a little clue as to what is coming next. We see this all over the historical narratives of Ruth, of the Old Testament. The last line of Ruth 1 says this: "As the barley harvest was beginning," and there is this note of hope. So here's what I want to do. I want to read through. We're going to cover all of chapter 2 today because it's kind of a solid, singular unit of text, of narrative. So we're going to read through it all together here. I'm going to read it from the New Living Translation because the New Living just does a wonderful job of rendering the Hebrew into readable modern English, especially with stories like this. So I'm going to read through it in the New Living Translation, and then the NIV will be what I use to kind of walk through the text after that. So sit back and enjoy. Ruth chapter 2. Now there was a wealthy and influential man in Bethlehem named Boaz, who was a relative of Naomi's husband, Elimelech. One day Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go out into the harvest fields to pick up the stalks of grain left behind by anyone who is kind enough to let me do it." Naomi replied, "All right, my daughter, go ahead." So Ruth went out to gather grain behind the harvesters. And as it happened, she found herself working in a field that belonged to Boaz, the relative of her father-in-law, Elimelech. While she was there, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. "The Lord be with you," he said. "The Lord bless you," the harvesters replied. Then Boaz asked his foreman, "Who is that young woman over there? Who does she belong to?" And the foreman replied, "She is the young woman from Moab who came back with Naomi. She asked me this morning if she could gather grain behind the harvesters. She has been hard at work ever since, except for a few minutes of rest in the shelter." Boaz went over and said to Ruth, "Listen, my daughter, stay right here with us when you gather the grain. Don't go to any other fields. Stay right behind the young women working in my field. See which part of the field they are harvesting and then follow them. I have warned the young men not to treat you roughly. And when you are thirsty, help yourself to the water that they have drawn from the well." Ruth fell at his feet and thanked him warmly. "What have I done to deserve such kindness?" she asked. "I am only a foreigner." "Yes, I know," Boaz replied, "but I also know about everything you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. I have heard how you left your father and mother and your own land to live here among complete strangers. May the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge, reward you fully for what you have done." "I hope I continue to please you," she replied. "You have comforted me by speaking so kindly to me, even though I am not one of your workers." At mealtime, Boaz called to her, "Come over here and help yourself to some food. You can dip your bread in the sour wine." So she sat with his harvesters, and Boaz gave her some roasted grain to eat. She ate all she wanted and still had some left over. When Ruth went back to work again, Boaz ordered his young men, "Let her gather grain right among the sheaves without stopping her, and pull out some heads of barley from the bundles and drop them on purpose for her. Let her pick them up and don't give her a hard time." So Ruth gathered barley there all day. And when she beat out the grain that evening, it filled an entire basket. She carried it back into town and showed it to her mother-in-law. Ruth also gave her the roasted grain that was left over from her meal. "Where did you gather all this grain today?" Naomi asked. "Where did you work? May the Lord bless the one who helped you." So Ruth told her mother-in-law about the man in whose field she worked. She said, "The man I worked with today is named Boaz. May the Lord bless him," Naomi told her daughter-in-law. "He is showing his kindness to us as well as to your dead husband. That man is one of our closest relatives, one of our family redeemers." Then Ruth said, "What's more, Boaz even told me to come back and stay with his harvesters until the entire harvest is completed." "Good," Naomi exclaimed. "Do as he said, my daughter. Stay with his young women right through the whole harvest. You might be harassed in other fields, but you will be safe with him." So Ruth worked alongside the women in Boaz's fields and gathered grain with them until the end of the barley harvest. Then she continued working with them through the wheat harvest in early summer. And all the while, she lived with her mother-in-law. That is Ruth, chapter 2. A couple of important background pieces for us to understand to get at this chapter. We're going to do some background context, and then we're going to get into some of the scenes and the characters that animate this beautiful story. The first one is this: the barley harvest. Woo. This is the Getzer calendar. Everybody say Getzer calendar. Very good. It looks like a Geezer calendar, but it's not that. It's not the Geezer calendar. It's the Getzer calendar. It's not a calendar for old people. It's just a very old calendar. This is, you'll get that later. That's fine. This piece of inscription is one of the earliest known examples of the writing of Hebrew. It's actually a very early form of Hebrew. It looks very different than the biblical Hebrew that I teach at Bushnell. But this is Hebrew in its earliest form. And you know what it is? It's an agricultural calendar. It's an agricultural calendar, something it might be like an activity that kids were to complete at school, or it might be like a little song that a farmer sang to himself while going about his work. It's not terribly clear, but here in this calendar we get, look at number 4 there, 1 month barley harvest. 1 month barley harvest. This calendar is dated to about 1,000 years BCE, which would have put it within 100 years, just within a single century of the story of Ruth. A good reminder, these are not old fairy tales that we are reading. These are real people in real space and time who lived real lives, and it is pretty cool that we have a piece of inscription like this that says, yeah, there was a barley harvest right about that time. A barley harvest happened end of spring-ish, late April, early May. Barley was essential to this subsistence economy that we looked at a few weeks ago, to this world that was barely getting by. Your job was to provide for your family from week to week, from month to month. And barley was a cheap grain, cheaper than wheat, that enabled the provision of the whole community, beasts included. Don't muzzle the ox while it is threshing. That is regarding the barley harvest. The barley is even for the beast, even for the ox. And this note of it being the time of harvest would have been a signal of hope. There's something good on the way for these people. And this is the exact time that Ruth and Naomi are showing up to Bethlehem. A village usually shares like a field for the most part. And yeah, the harvest was like a central like community activity. Which brings us to this next piece. It's not just about the harvest. There is embedded in the practice of Israel something that cares for not just the local community, but also those on the outskirts. This is a story. Ruth is a story about insiders and outsiders, and chapter 2 really crystallizes what we think about the two. But I want to be very clear, we're going to see Boaz come on the scene here as a man of character. What he's doing is not anomalous. What he's doing is right in step with the law, right in step with what Deuteronomy said to do all along. So background context, we have our barley harvest, but we also have this practice of gleaning. That's what Ruth says she wants to do. She says to Naomi, let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain. Let me go glean the grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor. This gets back to Deuteronomy 24. And just in case like you sit down to do your devotions and your Bible doesn't just plop right open to Deuteronomy 24. Let me read for you a couple of these verses about this principle. Deuteronomy 24, verse 19 and following. When you are harvesting in your field and you overlook a sheaf, do not go back to get it. Leave it for, and hear this, leave it for the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow. The foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. When you beat out the olives from your tree, do not go over to the branches a second time. Leave what remains for the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow. When you harvest the grapes, so on and so forth. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt. This is why I command you to do this. Remember, this is not about you grasping at your security. I provide that for you. You can leave some left over. Scarcity mindset goes to die here in the gleaning laws. Don't scrounge for every last scrap. Leave some for those who cannot do for themselves. Think about this for a second. A foreigner, the fatherless, and a widow. Ruth is all three. Ruth is out of place. She is out of a family. And she is out a husband, which puts her right in the middle of who this law is meant to be providing for. And Boaz, being the upstanding man that he is, he goes by this principle. He, though wealthy and could do anything with his wealth, he says, I'm going to follow this law to a T. And so it becomes a field where those who find themselves down and out can come and find provision for themselves. So a couple of things here. First of all, we see Ruth's courage on display. She takes Naomi's well-being into her own hands. Let me go to glean in the fields. Let me go provide for us. Remember, Ruth would be a quite elderly woman at this. Naomi would be a quite elderly woman at this point, not able to go secure a day's work for herself, most likely. And so Ruth takes matters into her own hands. And we can see a little bit of parallel here with what Elimelech does in Ruth chapter 1. He just takes the matter into his own hands. And while he goes to a foreign land, and we see what happens there, Ruth stays within the bounds of Israel. She stays right there in this new hometown to her. And she takes Naomi's well-being into her own hands. As a foreign woman, she is already in a vulnerable state, without security, without place, without people. She's already in a vulnerable state, and deciding to go glean in a stranger's field puts her at risk, but she decides to go anyway. Let's not downplay how bold of a decision this is by Ruth to go do this gleaning for her and Naomi. And when she acts, and this is important, when she goes and does, Ruth does not sit back and go, well, I hope something works out for us. She takes action. She does something. And when she acts, I love the way the text says this, it just so happens that she ends up in the field of Boaz. The Hebrew reads and perchance, just on accident, she just happened to end up in Boaz's field. If I was narrating the story in a movie, I would say, and would you looky here? She ends up in Boaz's field. So that brings front and center, who is this guy? Who is this Boaz? Well, first of all, we get the first detail of this chapter is this. Now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, and there's a disjunctive vav at the beginning of the. Sorry, I didn't warn you about nerd stuff, but it's happening right now. At the beginning of this chapter, which is a vav on a noun. So anytime a vav, which is like a conjunction, is attached to not a verb but instead a noun, it's a shifting of our attention in the story. Now Naomi, look here. The narrator is saying, now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, a man of standing from the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. We learn later in the chapter that this man is a redeemer, a guardian redeemer, a kinsman redeemer. And in other words, one who can buy back that which has been left untended to within his own family system. So this is an important figure. We get this note. Naomi had this relative, and it just so happens that Ruth ends up in his field. So he's a near relative, but what else do we learn about him? Here in 2:1, he is a man of standing is what the NIV says. I believe the NLT said a man of, wealth and influence, a man of wealth and influence. And this is different ways of rendering the Hebrew phrase a gibor hayil, a warrior of valor, a man of strength, a man of substance, a man of hayil. Not the only character who's going to have that said of them. Not the only one who gets this word strength associated with them, but you got to keep coming back week after week to find out who. a man of Hayil. He's a man of valor, a man of integrity, a man of wealth. All these things implied by this word. A choice warrior. He's a Gibor Hayil. Gibor is a warrior. He's a man of battle, of strength, who has principle and fights for what is right. He's one who does the right thing in a difficult situation. All these things implied by this title. And so you and I are then invited to read the rest of the story through this lens. This man is a man of character. What does it look like for a man of character to conduct himself in his setting, in his context? Watch how the rest of this story unfolds to see how a person of character acts. Will he hold up or will he crumble? Well, Ruth chapter 2 begins to tell that story. When Boaz shows up, we see what kind of man he is. We see what he's made of. It's a really fun scene as he comes back. He's been out of town. He comes back to Bethlehem, shows up at the field. One, it's obvious that his workers know him. There's a greeting that's exchanged in both ways. They exchange the harvesters and Boaz exchange blessings in the name of the Lord. The Lord bless you. The Lord be with you. It's clear that Boaz is a man of faith. It is clear. I hear in this one simple interaction, a person who is magnanimous, just a person who is big of heart, who is eager to see those working in the fields. Boaz is not the CEO off in the corner office who has no idea what his workers are doing. He knows his people. He knows those who work for him. He is a man of character. He's a man of faith. And remember, this is during the period of the judges. And we just saw in the period of the judges that everybody's doing what is right in their own eyes. Leadership is corrupt. Israel as a society is going way off course. And in that very day, you have a man of character standing up and saying, no, I'm going to do it a different way. I'm going to do it the right way. God said, do it this way, and that's how I'm going to be. Don't let the way that society is out there ever keep you from a courageous, character-forming life. Don't let it happen. These are the days of the judges, and Boaz stands out as a man who does things the right way. He immediately notices someone out of place in his context. He knows his field so well. He knows his context so well that the moment he shows up, he sees Ruth over on the side and goes, "Who's that? I've not seen her here before." And it's clear as you read along in the story, that there are women who come and glean in Boaz's fields regularly. And so he knows them as well, so well that, remember, they are not his responsibility. He's doing the right thing by leaving stuff behind for them, but he doesn't need to know them by name. He doesn't need to know who they are, but he knows their faces well enough to see Ruth over on the side and go, "Who is she?" Do you hear the recognition? Do you hear the compassion just in being able to see? That is who Boaz is. And his harvester, his lead foreman, tells him, she is, and notice this, verse 6, she is the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi. We're going to watch this shift over the course of the story of Ruth. Ruth doesn't even get named in this verse. All the foreman knows is that she's a Moabite from Moab. You get Moab mentioned twice here in just one quick sentence. Ruth is a label, and it's not a pretty one. It's a foreign woman. She said, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters." She came into the field and has remained here from morning until now, except for a short rest in the shelter. So the foreman acknowledges she came and she asked permission, and she's worked very, very hard. And for all of Boaz's provision of Ruth, here in this chapter, he he lets her keep the dignity of actually doing the work. He doesn't just say, oh, you don't have to do anything. Let me just provide for you. He gives her the dignity, the human dignity of doing the actual work. Ruth is a hard worker, and he lets her be such. I think it's significant. And he responds in two clear ways, but one, ensuring her safety and providing for her lavishly. He ensures her safety. I have told the men not to lay a hand upon you. I've told the men not to lay a hand upon you. It would have been a vulnerable situation for these women to be in this field among these workers. They were putting themselves out there. And Boaz says, you're not getting away with anything in my field. He says that to his young men. You're not getting away with anything. And instead, to the vulnerable in the situation, he says, this is a place that you can be safe. A lot can be learned from the way the most powerful person in a scene treats the least powerful person in a scene. Boaz is the embodiment of both strength and kindness. He is not going to let something unjust happen on his watch. And he is also going to be sure to provide lavishly for this. He calls her my daughter, this like term of affection, my daughter for Ruth, because he knows what it has cost Ruth to be in that moment. He knows that she is in a foreign land, that she has given up what she knows well, that she's probably nervous just being there. He knows all of that. He sees her story, slows down, and says, let me provide for you. Surely there is some measure of Boaz's relational connection with Naomi that drives this. He's like, that's my relative, and you cared for my people, and I really, really appreciate that. And so he goes above and beyond. He makes sure that she has not just a meal, but she gets to eat with the workers for the meal. She has some left over, and by the end of her day, she ends up with this full ephah. This is the amount that was sent to the battle at Goliath. The amount that Jesse sent to his sons, his entire group of sons. Ruth walks away with that much grain. I can't just imagine what Ruth was like walking down the street back to her home that day. And she gets to the door and Naomi goes, "Where were you today?" That's the kind of provision, that's the kind of bounty that is provided when a man takes both strength and kindness seriously. That's the way it's meant to be. And there's something to this, and I want to drill down on it for just a moment. When Boaz shows up, we see what kind of man he is, and it's the kind of man that we need today. Good men are strong, and I don't mean in just a physical sense, but they're strong of character, strong of heart. They're not going to get knocked over by anybody. Good men are strong, they take responsibility, and they create environments of safety for everyone to thrive, for everyone. That's what good men do in a society. Men, if you are acting passively in some area of your life, that's not just a little bit of selfishness for you to be comfortable. That is creating an environment that could potentially do danger and harm to another. Take responsibility. What's an area of your life where you have let something slide that it is time to stop letting something slide? Be strong, take responsibility, create safe environments for others, whether that's within your tent or outside your tent, as Boaz does here. That's what good men do in a society. Boaz, the insider, sees Ruth, the outsider, in a couple of important ways. One, not as a threat, but as an opportunity for blessing. And Boaz, the insider, sees Ruth, the outsider, not as an inconvenience, but as someone to provide for. And again, this is not anomalous. It is in Israel's society at this particular moment, because this is the days of the judges. Everybody's doing what's right in their own eyes, and everything is going to hell in a handbasket everywhere around Boaz. But he's a man of character. This is what was laid out in the law. This vision right here of the foreigner, of the down and out being provided for by what God was already doing within the society, that was God's vision all along. And Boaz captured it. Boaz captured the vision, and it changed the way that he did his work. It influenced and impacted the way that he conducted himself with his harvesters, with his field, with the women working there. So that when the other shows up into his scene, he knows exactly what to do. They'll be provided for. This is a safe place for you. That is the image of provision. All throughout the Old Testament, that's what it's supposed to be. Boaz is actually doing it. And it's a beautiful thing to see. I want to think a little bit more about insiders and outsiders here together. Biblical faith. And I'm saying biblical faith in a broad sense, because this is a New Testament idea for sure. It is embodied perfectly in the person of Jesus for sure. But we're reading Ruth here in the Old Testament. We don't have to wait until the New Testament to see good gospel principles arise. Biblical faith is best exemplified when those within the community of faith broaden the tent for the other rather than seeing them as a danger. This is the life of Boaz. He broadens his tent of faith. He broadens his provision. Just by being faithful to Yahweh, being faithful to what has been commanded of him. This is, of course, who Jesus is perfectly. The one who broke every religious category that was held in the day to make way for the down and out, to make sure that provision was for any and all, that safety was something for all. That's who Jesus was. We see it embodied in the character of Boaz here. We don't have to wait till the New Testament to see it. Biblical faith is best exemplified when those who are on the in do something for the sake of those on the out. Let's repent of hearing that last sentence as a political statement. Okay? Not a political statement. And let's stop acting like it is one. I don't care what you see posted. I don't care who you voted for. If you are on the inside, you care about the person on the outside. That is the way of Jesus. Okay. Another principle from the life of Boaz and Ruth, both, that I want to drill down on here as we wrap up. Biblical faith does not wait for the right moment to act courageously. Does not wait for the right moment, for things to be just right in society. When leadership is corrupt and society seems to be falling apart, people of strength and character can still have remarkable, transformative impact within their contexts. Boaz and Ruth both exemplify this in this story. Do not despair. Don't roll over and play dead. Don't curl up in a ball when the situation is dire. Do not for a moment let the chaos of what is happening out there unravel your ability to be a person of foundation and faith over here. I see it joked about sometimes, and I get it to an extent, but I see it joked about online sometimes when a news cycle spins out of control. And let's be clear, the news cycles are spinning out of control at an alarming rate these days. I'm not downplaying that at all. It's a mess out there. It is. But what bothers me is when Christians in particular say something about that news cycle out there, something to the effect of I have to unplug for this day. Well, unplug is a good thing actually, but I have to. I can't for the rest of the day is something that I see, or or I need to go have a cup of tea and just be by myself for the rest of the day. Brothers and sisters, if a government shutdown is enough to unmoor your faith, that is a sign, that's an indicator of something internally being off. We do not sit around and wait for society to come around. We do not sit around and wait for all of the right cultural conditions to fall into place for us to be people of faith. It's not how it works. You today can be a person of courage and character. God today wants to use you as a transformative agent in your society. Boaz is called a man of compassion, a man of chesed, a man of steadfast love. He is a vessel of the love of God in his world. He embodies both strength and kindness, and you can too. You are meant to be this. You are meant to do this. News cycles will be what they are. You are meant to stand up and be a person of courage, of courage and character. Someone who carries the love of God with you. So a couple of reflection questions, kind of to get all up in your business here, just as a warning. What is it about exclusion that makes the in crowd feel better about itself? What is it about exclusion that makes the in crowd feel better about itself? Do you have a personal story of having been the outsider and having the insider step up and defend you? Someone show up on your behalf? Or how about a story about being the insider and stepping up to defend an outsider? What did it cost you to do that? And as you think about those examples, I want you then to turn your attention to your life right now. Where in your life can you use your position to elevate, care for, and show the kindness of God to someone, particularly to someone that you might call the other, someone that you might see as being on the outside? God has given each of us a position of authority in our lives, in our context. It may be family, work, whatever it is. He has given each of us a position. What will you do with the power that has been granted to you?
Thanks so much for tuning in, and we hope the sermon inspired you in one way or another. If you'd like to stay connected with us, feel free to hit the Contact Us button on our website. Let us know who you are and send us any questions or prayer requests you may have. Or visit us in person at Prairie Mountain School in Eugene, Oregon at 10 a.m. on Sundays. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram to stay updated on all things Westside. We'll see you next time.